How's it going, Comfort 12? Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Joey Cruz, and I'll be doing my presentation on the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg. So to start with the basics, the country itself is landlocked between Belgium, Germany, and France, and it is close to 1,000 square miles in size. Now the population is a little over 600,000, so about closer to 700,000, I believe. And it consists of a very complex demographic. And what I mean by complex is that there are multiple backgrounds and cultures that make up the country, right? So much of the people that live there speak several languages such as German or Portuguese or French. And I know I mentioned on the slide English, but it's a very small demographic of English. It's mostly just people that come from outside of the country and I guess migrate there for a short period of time. But there is a small population of people who speak English. And I wouldn't be surprised if most of them can learn English easily, only because they have such a very interesting background that allows them to what's it called? To get this, I guess, a gift of them to learn language because their demographic is just very broad. So all these languages are actually a part of their school curriculums for language courses to keep up with the diversity within the country and the diversity within their history and background. I actually think it's really cool because many kids learn to be bilingual and multilingual at a very young age because of their schooling. Now, religion, in moving on to the next point, religion is mainly Roman Catholicism, and you'll definitely learn that Roman Catholicism and religion as a whole in the country plays a huge role in Luxembourg. And later in the presentation, I'll be explaining why, or at least touching a little bit of why. So the final thing on the slide is based on governance. Now, Luxembourg is one of the only countries in the world today that is still run under a Dutch and Duchess democracy. So it's almost like the monarchy that they have in Great Britain when they have the Queen. But with Luxembourg, they have a Duke, and it is essentially like royal blood that is kind of inherited through time. And yeah, it's pretty cool. I honestly didn't realize that certain countries still run under these circumstances, and they make it work apparently, and it's great. I love all the things that I actually found out about Luxembourg, and it's so unfortunate that they have so much to offer, yet I have so little time to share with you. So I'm going to try to get as much as I can in this presentation about the country itself within about a 5 to 10 minute time frame. The cool thing about this too is that in regard to the readings from Jan, the story of Luxembourg's creation is similar to that of the Hmong tribe's dualism. So Luxembourgers somewhat live a dual lifestyle because of the dual society that the country offers, right? So many influences are going to be mentioned throughout the presentation, as like I said earlier. All right, so the history. Now on the slide here, I kind of put the basis of what I believe is important to know about Luxembourg. Again, there's so much that happened within this country, and it's so hard to fit centuries of history that made the country what it is today. But this is the gist of what I believe is important to understand how Luxembourg is what it is. So prior to becoming independent in 1890, there's been a very complex history, right? That involves multiple successors, leaders, even continental wars that end up trying to take the land of Luxembourg, trying to fight for whose land is going to be whose, which country is going to own what. And Luxembourg became this hot commodity of choice, throughout history and in times of wars, dating all the way back to the Roman Empire and the ancient Romans. There was conquest that made Luxembourg a land owned by countries such as Italy or Rome, Spain, Germany, France, of course, the Netherlands, even Austria, and some were even a combination of joint ownership based on treaties, wars, or through marriage. And sorry, that was my computer. Through marriage, and has constantly been changed in ruling of ownership since the Roman Empire. So because of this very complex history, there's really no direct culture from Luxembourg, at least anything that I came across, right? So it's rather more adaptations of multiple cultures that influence the country's current state. So it's more like a product of its surroundings, right? So the country has adapted to all these different influences that surrounds it. So it really depends on the circumstance. So shifting much further into history, we see that there's new events that essentially formulate Luxembourg. So one of the things that I think is important to mention is that Luxembourg is the oldest, or one of the oldest, if not the oldest, Grand Duchy in the world, and it still exists as one today. So even just seeing the architecture, the scenery, and everything that's made, which is here on the next slide. This is some of the pictures that I pulled up from different websites, from just searching on Google itself. So the scenery and how everything was made, the structures, and the influence by so many different backgrounds, including those of royal blood, such as kings and queens, dukes, duchesses, or I don't know if it's duchess, and so on during early civilization. So just the architecture, like, it's very, very, in some areas, very Gothic, very, very Roman Catholic, very, very religious in a sense. Even just the structures of how they are built on mountains and around forestry, it's amazing. It's like, it's literally what you see in movies about, like you get what I'm saying. It's very vintage, and it fits the scenery of a really, really good love story, a really, really good storyline about history, because it offers so much. So with Luxembourg, I'm just trying to think of the name. So with Luxembourg, it had this era of war, and this war was considered the 80 Years' War, which was essentially like a long range of Dutch war for independence. And Luxembourg became a part of the Southern Netherlands, then passed on to the Austrian dynasty in 1713. So prior to being Austrian dynasty, the Southern Netherlands owned, or kind of occupied, the country itself for around a century. A little over a century later, after the dynasty, an occupation from France during the revolution was taken. And then shifting again about a century later, around, I believe, 1815, that's when they transformed Luxembourg into a Grand Duchy and became a union of the Netherlands. So in 1815, they signed the Treaty of Paris. And the crazy thing is that the Treaty of Paris actually offered so much, not just to Luxembourg, but at that time also to the United States. It was a revolution to gain independence. So that's essentially what the Treaty of Paris was, to gain independence, or for the United States to gain independence. The cool thing about it, interesting fact, is that the Treaty of Paris is an extension to similar passings later, probably around another century later. And reason why I say that is because Guam is also part of the Treaty of Paris, at least in the deal that was created. So Guam became a territory of the United States and was surrendered from Spain when they were on their revolution. And I thought that was really cool. I'm from Guam, so I thought that was like really interesting for me to learn. So just by looking at the different activities throughout the country, or through websites, news articles, videos, and you can already tell that the leisure time in Luxembourg is very, very artistic, simplistic, and I guess aesthetic, because the reason I use all these three words is because Luxembourg is actually, it just looks like an image and video clips that you advertise in a country, and it's something that just makes people say, wow, I want to go there just to look at it, So you notice that the architecture is very vintage, the surroundings are not very modern, but they're also they're not very run down, if that makes sense. So the history values are very, very prominent in the country. And a lot of the activities are more outdoorsy type and scenery. Of course, there are some roller coasters and amusement parks, but obviously there are some special events that may include a fair with carnivals, with carnival rides, and, so like traditional kind of festivals that they kind of create, that they formulate in order to have this massive celebration. So considering it's really small in location with around 500,000 occupants, most of the activities available are performance-based and nature-related. So on the Luxembourg website, these are some of the events that are happening within this year. Here are some outdoor activities that you can do in Luxembourg. It's really cool. They have literally almost everything there in regard to outdoor activities. They have 4 seasons, which is great. And it's such a good location to be in. And there's just so much, and people don't really realize what Luxembourg is until they really dive into what this country offers. Now on this next slide, this is a very, very brief summary of what their biggest focuses are. So they have massive celebrations, and one of the things that I mentioned earlier is that Roman Catholicism became a very, very important thing to the country, and here you'll see why. So on Easter, which is like an important aspect of Catholicism, they actually have a day dedicated for certain things throughout their 40 days of Lent. And if you don't know what that is, it's essentially like a time to surrender certain things, but for the sake of not you, but to understand that they're man, I'm not so sure of this. I know I'm Catholic. This is so bad, but just know that the 40 days of Lent is very traditional in the Catholic faith, and it comes with sacrificing certain things throughout those 40 days. And it's cool. It's really cool. And especially in this country, because if you look here on the picture, 2 of these pictures are actually festivals related to the time of Lent. The bonfire day is a day where they kind of evaluate the celebration that they have. It's a natural way of showing that there is this higher power in the world, and they use bonfires to kind of establish that or symbolize that. Top picture on the top, or the top picture on the right, is the Easter festivals. They have these massive festivals for Easter, which it just has a never-ending list of activities that you can do throughout the 40 days of Lent. And of course, they're very traditional too. So a lot of those activities are very, very minimal in size, very quiet, very respectful. And then you also have major events such as national holidays, such as their National Day, or it's essentially the birthday of the Duke, which happens, I believe, on June 23rd every year. They have this massive festival with fireworks, and again, like carnival style, they have big rides, they have Ferris wheels. I don't know if they have roller coasters, but it's really cool. And that's essentially what the 2 pictures on the left are, bottom and top. And then going into the national motto. So the national motto stands for, it doesn't even give me an enunciation. I was trying to find videos of how to pronounce it and stuff like that, but I couldn't find any. So it essentially means we want to remain what we are. And I love how that's the motto, because at the end of the day, like, their history matches so much to what this means. And cool thing about it is that I don't even know if they intended to make this motto to match their history. But for me, I look at it this way. We want to remain what we are, right? And in a sense, it's very hard for Luxembourg to identify who they are, because it's such a broad history, such a very complex understanding of the origins of the country, right? So with all these different influences, they really make it work. They are one of the richest countries in the world. They have established such a very dominant presence in regard to sociology, because they're so open to different ideas, because there's so many cultures involved. They're open to so many different things. As a matter of fact, there's going to be an interesting fact that I mentioned on the next slide that just blew my mind. So you'll learn. I'm going to definitely go into some of the facts some of the interesting facts about Luxembourg before. Oh, this went over time, but it's really a lot, and I really am enjoying doing this presentation, because it's just such an interesting country. So here are some of the interesting facts. So I'm going to go through it really quickly. So the flag is essentially the same as the Netherlands, but just a shade lighter. The meanings are very different. However, I didn't look into the meanings of the Netherlands. Some of them have similar symbolisms, but this is the symbolic meaning for the colors on the screen. So vibrancy, revolution, power, determination, and courage is red. Harmony, peace, and innocence, white. And perseverance and determination is blue. And this is the description that the flag gives about the country, which every flag usually does, right? It's just a symbolic meaning to identify what that country is in a short synopsis. So they're the oldest Grand Duchy to date, which I did mention. And I believe they're the only one in existence today. So I think I've read that maybe like once or twice in some of the articles that I came across, which I think is still pretty cool. They are one of the smallest, however, one of the richest countries in the world due to their steel industry and their banking industry. So the steel industry is so massively important to Luxembourg, because they distribute steel for these major factories and stuff and all these different businesses through Belgium, all over Europe, which is insane. And their banking, they have one of the top rated banking industries in the world, and business corporations around the world actually turn to Luxembourg to learn more of these aspects, to become better businessmen, better businesswomen. And yeah, Luxembourg is that one spot for business apparently, so it's pretty cool. Most citizens are trilingual, like I mentioned in the beginning, and it's due to their historical value and language influences, which can't even say more about that. Now, here's the one that I was talking about, because the sociological aspect of everything and the diversity of the country. The one thing that really stood out to me is they have a prime minister that is openly gay, and this is the first of its kind. So he's more leaning to the Democratic policy. He's not in the Democratic Party, but his beliefs lean more to Democrat, which is pretty cool, and it essentially kind of matches the idea of diversity if you depending on how you look at politics. So the commodity of choice, which is the next one, the commodity of choice between several countries throughout history, mentioned that thoroughly, I believe, throughout the history slide. And then most people work in the country but don't live there. So that's I thought that was very interesting, because people travel miles upon miles to reach a certain destination in Luxembourg, then travel back out to their country of origin, and they just work there. And it's one of the richest countries in the world. It pays well, offers so many benefits. So people travel because the benefits outweigh the travel distance, which I thought was insanely cool. It's nice to be able to just travel from one border to another without any troubles. United States, what you doing though? And like I mentioned earlier, these are the two major industries is banking and mining. So the mining, what I mean by mining is steel. They're steel mining. So those are the two major industries, and it's making them one of the most competitive for business and economic growth in the world. And then these are my sources, my references. The Culturegram, the Jantz textbook is in here, along with several articles, different websites to find certain events, and I think I included some links to some of the pictures that I used. But that was my presentation on Luxembourg. There's just so much about this country that I want to mention, and it's so unfortunate again that there's like a little time to do it. But I'm gonna end now. It's almost 17 minutes, so I appreciate your time. Thank you everyone for watching, and I hope everyone's doing well.